Welcome to the Inside Outlands podcast. I'm your host, Mind Trip, and as always, your co-host, Nat Ryle.
Hey, what's going on?
And today we have joining us Jaden. How's it going, Jaden?
Hey, good. I'm happy to be here.
Cool, man. Glad to have you on. You're kind of the man behind the scenes that doesn't really get to talk a lot about what he's doing, so it's pretty cool to have you on here, and with your knowledge of mechanics and the programming you've done, it should be an interesting show.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk it over and hype Outlands a little bit.
Yeah, why don't we say what your role is with the Outland Shard right now?
Yeah, so I was primarily just a beta tester for all of beta. I started helping out in the beta in August of 2017. I can't believe it's been that long, but I was testing Majory and some of the combat mechanics and working on weapon damage formulas and things like that. Doing a lot of math. That's what I became known for throughout the course of the beta.
That's where that joke came from. Okay.
Yeah, everybody, anytime there's like a formula somebody wants to work out, or something that somebody wants to check the chance of something if they change the formula to another one, they just ping me in Discord and says, Jaden, do the math. So I've been doing that for a long time. I was trying to play some on the actual beta and just getting real bad headaches from the 12.5 FPS, and decided to do something about it. So I went out searching for some other alternative clients and came across the Orion client, which I had not seen before. Last time I had looked, probably 2 or 3 years ago, there were other clients, but they weren't anywhere near playable. There was UOXNA, Salos, but there's no source for that. UO Fluorescence is another one that has some code in it that's kind of cool, but never made it that far along. But when I found Orion, it was semi-close. And the guy who wrote Orion originally, Hot Ride, had been working on it for years. And so I basically said, okay, what do I need to do to adapt this to work on Outlands? And the first thing I identified was, after discussing with Owen and Lutheus, was that the assistant was just not going to work here. It was a full scripting language. You could do whatever you wanted from the assistant as fast as you wanted to do it. So I dumped that. I took it out and replaced it with Razor, which took some time and is still has some challenges that I'd like to work through. And then there's some other custom stuff about Outlands that I started patching in, the custom status bar, the health and status screen, and some of the text was changed.
Was that Lutheus originally, or was that because the status bar we have now has the bandage timer?
Yeah, so there's some history there. That was originally patched into the client. They changed the layouts of where it puts the stats that the client displays in memory by actually directly editing the UO client executable. And it was a guy, his Discord handle was Beagle, and I don't know where he went. I believe he moved to Australia or something, and then disappeared. Maybe he's back. I don't know. But he did that, and it was great. Lutheus did the server side part because we changed the resistances from AOS inside the network packets to have those new values for the bandage timer and the murder timer and things like that. So Lutheus changed the server side. He changed the client code. It's not really the code. You just have to direct edit, the memory. So it's pretty challenging work. And that was all great. And then I basically reverse engineered that and implemented it in regular code in Orion so that it looks exactly the same.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So that was sort of my solution to I just could not take 12.5 frames per second. That's how fast the original client runs. It renders a frame every 80 milliseconds.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in Orion, and you can make it do that by dragging the slider all the way to 12 FPS. So
Yeah.
if you really love it, like I know Papa.
Well, so that there's a funny story about that.
Okay.
I originally took the Orion client, and I've done hundreds of patches to Orion at this point. It's significantly different than the version I had originally picked up. But one of the patches I did changed the way the frames per second were calculated. And so if you go to the original Orion that I forked off of, that's I don't know if everybody's familiar with coder terms, but when you take a project and you start working on it off on your own, and you go off in your own direction, we call that a fork. When I originally forked Orion to work on it, it had some issues with the animations, that it wasn't perfectly lined up. Your feet didn't line up to the ground. It was kind of like the FPS patch. If anybody's familiar with what that's looked like.
I looked into it today. It's you kind of slide around.
Yeah, you're ice skating. That's at least what I think it looks like. I can explain what the FPS patch does. It's actually pretty simple, but the real challenge is if you don't have the animations lined up with the render speed, you look like you're sliding, right?
Okay.
So I made a bunch of changes to get it pixel perfect lined up, and I had to learn a lot about how Ultima Online worked. It turns out it's everything's really nice, simple, round math, clearly well designed. Anyway, I changed the render speed to, I figured out that it was exactly 80 milliseconds per frame, 12.5 FPS. That's the right speed for the original client. And so I had all the math based on, I have to change a frame when I render every 80 milliseconds to get the animations to line up pixel perfect. But in Orion, you're actually rendering much faster. You're doing 100 frames per second. So there's all sorts of math to figure out, like when you render and you're in between two frames of the animation, which one do you pick? Things like that to make it look smooth.
Right.
And so I worked on that a whole lot. And then when I released it to get the animations pixel perfect, and they looked right, finally, you weren't sliding anymore. The first request I got was, can you make the slider go down? The minimum was 30 originally. Can you make the slider go down to 12.5, the original? And I was like, why would you want to do that? We just spent all this time trying to make, it look better. Why would you want to go back down to 12.5? Well, people do. It's nostalgia. I've gotten a lot of requests to make the mouse run in a separate thread like the original client can, so that people can actually play at 12.5 frames per second. We'll see if I do that.
If the goal is to have this replace Steam and Razer, which it sounds like from Owen that's an eventual goal, maybe a year or two down the road, or however long the project takes, this or another project, you're going to have to satisfy the users that really want the old school feel. So doing the work in to get 12.5 FPS, it's not wasted effort. Because when you ask them to come to it, they can still recreate the old client feel.
Yeah, and so the main thing blocking that at the moment is making the mouse. So the old client has an option to make the mouse render in a separate thread. That's what it says. What that means is the mouse renders at like 60 FPS, and the rest of the screen renders at 12.5.
Okay.
And so the logic in Orion, the mouse renders at the same rate as the rest of the screen in Orion. So when you're at 100 FPS, it looks great. But when you go down to 12.5, your mouse gets choppy because the whole screen is choppy.
Oh, okay.
So if I'm going to make it really suitable for these, people who want to render at 12.5 frames per second, I've got to add in the logic to make the mouse still render much more quickly.
Right. You got to separate it out.
Mm-hmm.
So has your role expanded? Because it sounds like it has, which is why we brought you on, because you're the lag buster, or you helped assist that.
I was just a beta tester through all of beta, working on Orion with no actual privileges. I didn't have any knowledge of the code. I knew it was based on ClassicUO, which is open source. Everybody has access to that. So I didn't have anything special. I was just contributing, a client. I was trying to do some fixes in Razor, when they would come up, people would, run into bugs or things like that and ask me, is there anything I can do about this? And so over time, I guess my reputation as somebody who could help with technical issues grew. I think it was probably 6 months ago, 8 months ago or something, Owen started searching for who would eventually become his counselors. And he asked me if I would do it. And I said, that was before I had really worked on Orion a ton. Like, I think I'd put out one release or something. I was doing a lot of beta testing then and answering a lot of questions. And so I said, of course, I'll be a counselor. And the way the counselors work is, you have sort of an alias that is your counselor alias, and it's all very segregated and things like that. They've got very strict anti-corruption policies going on in the server behind the scenes. Over time, as the number of people and the interest in Orion sort of grew, it became clear that I was not going to be able to operate under an alias as a counselor. And so, because everybody knew the name I'm under now, which
that makes sense.
Right. So, you pick a name in 8th grade when you play video games, and then you have to keep it the rest of your life. That's pretty much the situation I'm in. So I had to stay under this name because people know this name as the Orion guy, and as the guy who does the alternate client and can fix Razor and things like that. So I am sort of a special case, I guess, counselor. So I've yet to answer a page. Sorry. I do have a counselor account. I've logged in once.
Okay, hold on. I don't even know what a page is.
So like when you go into the help menu in game, and you can request GM assistance, and so those can get addressed by counselors. And there's a large team of counselors, behind the scenes trying to keep the number of pages at 0 all the time. So it's great if you run into an in-game bug. And that's what it's sort of for. It's not for feedback. Use Discord for that. But if you're experiencing some bug or you're stuck or something like that, you need help. That's what it's for. So, and there's people servicing those. So, but not me. I have not been diligent in my duties. I also have real accounts that I would like to play on, but I've yet to make it off of Shelter Island.
Yeah, that's the other question I had. And we don't have to get to it right now, but is there a difference between you and other counselors?
Yeah, so there's some difference between my role and the other counselors. I haven't really been playing the actual server. I don't have time for that, and frankly, I love the coding anyway. So I spend my time doing that, making the tools and making the alternate clients and consulting on bugs and trying to deal with security issues and things like that. Like I jumped in and I fixed the timer to make it accurate on the launch countdown website. So I think that's really my role. I doubt I ever get a chance to really play. If I were to play, there would of course be pretty severe restrictions on me, and I'll go into why, into what I'm allowed to do. They know, my IP addresses, they know my accounts, so I can be monitored. I doubt that will ever happen. So,
because I know Expo doesn't play.
He does not play. He actually has administrative power on the server. I do not.
Okay.
I just have a counselor account. Counselors can't really do much except teleport around and talk to people, So yeah, Expo is an actual GM, and Lens is an actual GM. Neither of them play on the server. Anybody with actual administrative power or access to the server itself does not play on the server.
I imagine you wouldn't be doing any guild warfare.
Well, I've never PvP'd in my 20-year history of UO, so it's not really a risk. But like, I also can't go get rares. I know where they are. Can't do that. And they would know immediately if I did. Anyway, it's all irrelevant because I'm basically not playing anyway. And I may formally declare that I am not playing and just end it at that shortly. So as the podcast, or as the server progressed into its first week, I was just the Outlands guy. I didn't have any special access except I was a counselor who could answer pages. And I mostly had counselor powers so that I could address Orion bugs in game by teleporting to people and watching things.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
You
So
could go invisible too, right?
yeah. So people would report an Orion bug, and I'd say, okay, reproduce it, and I'd watch, something like that. That's the only thing I ever use that account for. Or if there's like a rendering bug and I need to go to a specific location. You can't actually do anything on your counselor. You can just teleport around and look at things. But then the lag hit. And so the way, the lag hit because the population is enormous, right? It's not that Outlands had this lag problem and other servers don't. It's that Outlands is bigger than the other servers, right? And so they're encountering issues on the server side in Outlands that other shards just are not hitting. When the lag hit, I'm a professional software developer. I have access to lots of tools. I write high performance servers for a living. When the lag hit, I started talking to Lucius sort of behind the scenes, offered to set him up to take some CPU traces and to look at what was the total network usage, what was the total memory usage, all these sort of things, to start to try to triage what's going on. Why is the lag going up? It became pretty clear to me, at least right away, that first the host system, the network, was doing great. The network can handle this shard no problem. The host has reported a couple of DDoS attacks, which they handled without issue. So the lag was not the network. It can easily handle what we're doing here. The total memory usage on the shard was fine, well under the maximum. The disk write rate was fine. What was a little concerning was the CPU usage. And so I offered to set them up to take some CPU profiles, which show you sort of in the code what parts of the code are getting run the most often and taking the most time. And so I wrote up instructions and got Lucius all set up to install the right tracing software on the server. I don't have access to the server.
Just to be clear, this was after the patch server was separated, right?
Yes. So when the patch server, like the first 3 days, the patch server was getting hammered because everybody was downloading. And the server has 2 gigabits of network out of the server. The general host infrastructure is 120 gigabit. So it's got great, in the data center, it's got great connectivity. The actual host itself can do 2 gigabit out. And when you have 1,000 people downloading, it's not going to be able to do that. So Owen took care of all that behind the scenes. I was not involved in the patch server fixes. I'm sure he has war stories and war wounds from that, but he bought a new server and put it on there, and that seems to have solved that problem. So then after that, the population quickly rose, and when it started to hit about 800 or 900 people, clients connected, we would notice that the ping would start to shoot up. And so then I started doing all this profiling, and I started giving Lucius hints as to like what's going on, and basically identified 3 or 4 major problems that were causing the system to be, CPU bound. It couldn't keep up. And I talked to some other prominent people in the community, in particular Vorspire, who is the maintainer of CervUO, which is a major fork of RunUO that is still actively developed, and wrote the launcher for Outlands and other things. And he had already seen this problem like 3 years ago on another shard and had done some fixes for it, or at least one of the problems identified. There were actually 3. And so I took his fix for that particular problem. It had to do with searching for nearby players whenever something moves, to be able to send them a update packet. So anytime anybody moves, all the players around them have to be sent a notification that they moved, so that their client displays that they moved. And that search was one of the major problems. The server was spending a lot of its time doing that, about 50% of the total time searching for nearby players. The second major problem was in what's known as the timer subsystem in RunUO. And I won't get into too many of the low-level technical details here, but there were some locks that could be eliminated, software locks that could be eliminated, which I did. And then there was some issues in the networking code, which was suboptimal and needed, again, to eliminate some locks and to avoid some memory allocations and things like that. And so I gave those fixes to Lutheus. He deployed it, and the server is now consuming, I mean, it's dramatically lower. Let's just say, maybe 10 times lower. So instead of capping out at 800 or 900 population, we can go into several thousand for sure. I've got more fixes coming that should, we should be able to probably handle 10,000 people when all is said and done. And these are fairly minor little tweaks. They were not gigantic things. The server has been incredibly stable in terms of crashes. So it's been pretty positive. We were fortunate that the biggest problem, at least, had already had a solution out there in the open source community, and the other problems were relatively easy fixes. So we were able to turn it around pretty quickly and get it out.
Yeah, that's my question is this something that other shards have experienced and addressed in their own unique manner, and that, just Outlands hadn't had to do it yet because we hadn't hit that player count yet in beta?
So I think it's hard to know what other shards have done. One of the fixes is present in RunUO 2.6. This shard's based on RunUO 2.2. As are most, they're all based on 2.0 or 2.1 or 2.2 typically, but the latest released one is 2.6. So the movement fix was in 2.6, which was the last release of RunUO before that was sort of abandoned. The other fixes I did, I have never seen publicly. I don't see them in any open source code, so I don't know what the other shards have done behind the scenes, because people take the open source code, they fork it, and then make changes to it, and don't send the code back typically. So
yeah, nothing's hammered a server this much on a private shard since what, IPY, right? That had 1,400 at launch, 1,500 at launch.
Yeah, I am fairly confident that none of these changes that I'm making matter for other shards. I don't think they have any issue keeping up with their population. I think these are Outlands issues primarily, just due to the sort of scope of the population.
Yeah, and this got fixed really quick. I mean, we expect a launch to be crashes and rollbacks and anything else we've gone through it with an MMO launch. Not being able to progress, half your community getting in, while the other half is blocked out to either some patch or connection issue. Like Outlands had none of that. We're all able to get in and play, and then once that count got higher and higher, then we started getting lag. And I think I went to play Monday, and I almost logged out, thinking I'll come back, see if they fix it, but I stuck with it. Well, I was able to keep playing just fine. And then I think Tuesday or Wednesday, it was completely fixed. Tuesday.
Yeah,
probably,
I think
right?
I fixed it on Wednesday. I originally had just explained how to fix it to Lutheus because I didn't have access to the code, so I couldn't just fix it. And we went back and forth on several things, and he had other ideas about things to improve, which were good ideas. I'm sure they helped. And he was trying to do what I was telling him to do, and I'm sure I wasn't explaining myself clearly. But ultimately, I think it was the day the lag got fixed, he just said, here's the code, fix it. And so I did, and we deployed the patch, and that was it. And so since then, that's sort of been the turning point in my role, where I'm not just like Orion support as a third party, not involved in the shard, not involved in the management of the shard or anything like that. That's where I was. And then, we had this discussion that, if I'm going to come in and fix the lag and have access to the code, well, things need to change for me. And so, I accepted that. That was sort of, we understood what that would mean. I accepted the responsibility and went ahead and pulled down the code, made the fixes, and I'm continuing still in the background to push, code fixes and changes to Lutheus pretty much daily. My next major focus is going to be on security, and by security I mean preventing cheating.
Weren't you already kind of in that role earlier?
I was in that role, but without access to the server, I was limited in what I could do. I still don't actually have the ability to deploy code to the server. I can see the server code. I don't have access to any save files, so I can't see what's in your house, for example. When I start the code up on my local system, it's a blank world. But it is the real Outlands world, and I can test things. So I can make changes to the code, confirm they work, and then send the patch over to Lutheus, who then can actually deploy it to the real shard. That's sort of how the process works. So I don't have admin on the actual shard. I don't have access to the machine that runs it, but I do have the ability to see the code, no save files, but see the code, and I can propose changes, basically, that he has to accept. So yeah, I now am empowered to go make trickier changes, more clever changes to hopefully block some of these things.
Yeah, I wonder what your resources are for that, and if we really do need the new client, force everyone in the same client, same assist tool.
Yeah, I could do a whole lot more if we could drop Steam. And the challenge is Steam is not open source. So that means I can't really change it. And it's just going to do what it does. And so that locks me into I have to keep Steam working, and it limits my options for things I can change.
So it's official here. Just want to let you know, you can drop Steam when you put Loot Grid in something else.
Yeah, I think if we were to actually, just to be totally clear, the shard is not dropping Steam. That's it's not going to happen.
I'm joking, anyways. I'm going to say that like 5 more times in this, so that when you leave this show, to Loot Grid and Razor.
When I play with him, I have to hear about Loot Grid like 5 times a day.
Yeah, I love it too. I was hardcore into Steam, and I would have loved to have ported Steam to Orion, but I don't have the source, and we've reached out to the original authors and tried our best, but that's not going to happen. So the only path forward is to make Razor so good that nobody misses Steam, and that's a long project, I think.
Yeah, it's a good project though. It's probably one that's needed, because you being able to get in there and tinker with it, it's not a problem. It's going to go away.
Yeah. So I think over time, we'll improve Razor more and more and more. Hopefully over time, I don't know how long it will take, but we'll get to the point where if we say, we're just going to drop Steam, no one will care, because they're all using Razor and they're all happy. But unless that's the case, and it probably never will be, the shard will not drop Steam. Too many people like it, including myself.
Well, you can't ask someone. You won't want to ask someone to ditch their macro backlog. You can say you have a tool that gives you equal ability with your macros, but when you're going to force your users to ditch years of work that they feel, they don't want to rewrite all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's a big ask, but if you combine that with, here's the security features we can provide, here's why we're going forward, if you kind of explain where you're coming from, I think it might be an easier sell. If Outlands has to cross that road down the,
Yeah, I think if we got Razor to a certain point, it needs a better scripting language. I'm thinking currently to use Lua, which is a common scripting language in games. If we could get a Loot Grid, of course, and modernize it a little bit, then I think there is a possibility that people wouldn't revolt if we were to drop Steam. But I think that's a ways off.
What are you bringing to Razor though? What's your next thing you're trying to bring to Razor? I know you brought in a patch from, is it Razor Enhanced from?
So actually, I'm working with. So Razor Enhanced is a challenge for the shard, because that is a fork of Razor. So the original author of Razor was somebody who went by Zippy many years ago, and then another guy who went by, or his probable actual name is Mark, released the source code for Razor. It was actually a slightly earlier version of Razor that he had onto GitHub, which is a source code hosting site, in 2014. And it didn't actually work. If you downloaded it and you tried to build it and everything, it was totally broken. But in I think it was 2015, maybe 2016, I took that and I cleaned it up and I fixed the problems and I made it so that you could actually build your own Razor assistant from source and run it, and it would work. And I put it up on GitHub for everybody to have. And from that, over time, 2 projects have really started. There was Razor Enhanced, which is very, very, very different than Razor now. It's diverged a lot. And there is the Razor Community Edition, which is still fundamentally Razor. It feels like the same Razor. It's just modernized and has a lot of really cool features, but doesn't expand its capabilities in the sense of like PvP automation or anything like that. So Razor Enhanced adds a full scripting language. It's Python, and you can do whatever you want. So Razor Enhanced is not allowed on Outlands.
Okay, all right, that's clarified. Thank you.
Yeah, you cannot use Razor Enhanced on Outlands. We will actively fight against that. The Razor Community Edition was intended for UO Renaissance, the shard, and is being worked on by somebody in the community. Goes by Quick, and he's done really great work. And he didn't expand UO Renaissance has similar rules about automation and scripting and things like that to Outlands. Sort of the same worldview. They're slightly more draconian. They don't allow Steam, but it's the general, the same worldview as Outlands about what makes UO great and what ruins the game and things like that. So he was working within that framework, but adding all sorts of cool stuff. Like the screenshots now get automatically uploaded to a screenshot service on the internet. All sorts of better targeting things that are more similar to Steam, but don't work on other players. Like you can target closest creature, but you can't target closest player. So really cool stuff. The map works, all these sort of things. I decided, man, if I'm going to start a new Razor, why would I start from this, Razor 1.0 junk that I have up on GitHub? It's ancient. I'm going to start with this new cool one, right? Because it would be allowed here. It falls within the guidelines that we were given on what an assistant is allowed to do. So I reached out to him. He's very supportive. We talk quite a bit. He's got a couple of really core bugs that he didn't introduce, but were just present in Razor from forever. There's some pretty serious desync bugs in Razor in a number of cases, which people then put resyncs into their macros and things like that to try to work around them. So he explained to me how to make them happen, how to make the problems happen. And I went in and I fixed them. So Razor will, in the next release of Razor, will no longer randomly desync.
Oh, yeah, interesting. And I wonder if you can retrain people because they're so used to putting that in their macro that.
Yeah. So, yeah, you should no longer need to resync all the time. Anyway, Razor is fixed. And so that was kind of our exchange is, I get to use this new cooler Razor with all kinds of really neat user-facing features, and I'll go fix the core issues of, how it interacts with the client to make it not desync. And I'm sort of wrapping up that work. There's one more thing I need to fix on that. And then we'll release that and hopefully switch over to it. We've got to probably do an extended beta test or something. We can't lock people out of the game because they're trying to use old Razor and it doesn't work anymore and things like that. Some of the things beyond what's already been added that I would like to do is, again, add Lua as a scripting system. And I think the way I need to do that is not remove the old macro system in Razor, but add a additional scripting system so that you can write your old Razor macros and record them and things like that, or you can write Lua scripts. And so Lua is a scripting language that's pretty well known, well established in a lot of games. So a lot of people have some experience to that. It's going to feel kind of like Steam scripting, except more formalized and There's better tooling support, things like that. It's not some custom language. So I think that's the direction I'm going. That language is designed to be embedded and sandboxed. There's lots of great tutorials online, things like that. So that's kind of where I'm going for that. There's a couple issues that I'd like to work out to make it so that we can do target closest on non-players. We've mostly got those worked out.
Yeah, what are we actually allowed to use? Because I know a lot of the stuff you see in Steam and Razer just don't work.
Yeah, so they do a negotiate features sort of thing on the exchange with the server, and it says what things the assistants are allowed to do. The one thing Outlands disables is target closest, and that's mostly because it makes it too easy to set up sync dumps. But what they would allow, the problem with disabling target closest is it globally disables all types of target closest in that negotiation. And what Outlands really wants to do is disable target closest on players. They don't care if you target closest, a lich, whatever, a dragon. That's fine. And so they would love to be able to have an assistant that still allows people to do target closest in PVM, but not do it in PvP. And so that's what we're trying to deliver is, change the negotiation so that that flag only applies to player target closest.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Because that's stuff I definitely remember using that in Real Poor, and I tried to use it here, and it was turned off.
Oh, it's real convenient. So we're going to try to get that put back in. Then I'd also like to do. I've been talking to the developer of Ultima Mapper, Mad Martyr, and we'd like to do some ideas on how to get more information out of Razer for him to display on the map, and it's really all map programs. I'd like to do this. He might be limited in what he's allowed to do, but I'd, at least from my side, like to be able to broadcast more information about player positions and creature positions and player health and creature health, so that somebody could write a map program that displays players, your party members, and their health on the map. You'll only be able to see what your client can see, so 18 tiles around you, but you'll be able to see the enemy you're fighting on your little map and its health and whether it's poisoned or whatever. And then the final thing I'd like to add is try to figure out a way to do a loot grid. I'm probably not going to go as far as Steam did, where they actually overlay it in the client itself, but I may be able to pop up a window with the loot in it that you can click to loot just over top of your screen.
Yeah, it sounds like people are fine with it as long as there's a delay in each of your clicks.
Yeah, I think Steam has a 1 second delay between clicks, and I would do something similar.
Yeah. If you do that, you won't make the angry mob rise up against you.
Yeah, you can always loot faster by hand until you get carpal tunnel.
All right. Orion. So we've had beta 11. Then you reverted to beta 10 because there's that weird death bug in 11. And I know we get asked a lot. When is the next version of Orion coming with some minor bug fixes? Do you have any kind of ETA on?
Yeah, so I've got a bunch of fixes that several people have actually sent me some good bug fixes. I was actually sent a patch that adds in the counters to the title bar, which was fantastic. The main problem with beta 11 was I finally figured out what was wrong with the movement, and I got great testing during Outlands beta from beta testers who really were trying to break the movement and casting system, which is the trickiest part of all of the client, and getting it so you never desync and never freeze and everything stays smooth. I've learned a lot about movement over the course of that, and I finally got to the point where I think I really understand it at this point, and I understand what it needs to do. I started coding it, and then I got pulled into the lag issue and other server issues. So I had to put it on the back burner. I'd like to come back and fix that before I do another release. I may just put out another release before it's entirely fixed. In beta 11, I just made a silly mistake on the resync code, and it locks you up permanently, and you have to log out to get back in. So I took it down. I did fix that. I have that locally fixed. So the next one shouldn't be any worse in terms of movement from beta 10. And it will have all these new features and fixes and stuff. I think I have the shader fixed when you die. Some things turn black when you're dead. It's the grayscale calculations are wrong. I think I fixed that. It has counters in the title bar. A bunch of other bug fixes. It changes how the config files are saved, so they're plain text instead of these binary files that the original author decided to use.
Here, what's the other big one they ask all the time? Will you get UO Mapper to work with it in the next patch, or is that down the road?
It depends on how long you want to wait for the next patch. I certainly can make it work. I understand what it needs to make it work. I have it working with the new Razor. I had to make some changes to make that happen, and it works. I would love to port the new Razor I'm working on over to Orion so that I have the same assistant for the Classic client and for Orion, but it's just a bigger lift. So I haven't decided if I'm going to wait for everything to be in a release and then do it, or if I'm just going to start putting out releases with what I got. And incrementally go from there.
So I'll just say what I'm finding, because we have another podcast we do. It's kind of a multi-gaming community. We get players that come in to try UO, and they immediately can't handle a 12 FPS. So
I don't blame them.
Everyone says put them in Steam, it's stable, or Razer, it's stable. Don't put them in. Don't put them in Orion, but I can't get them to see the game for what it's worth because they can't get past the old client. And just the vets in the community can't see that because they're so used to it. Even I'm seeing it now. I've been on Steam now for 2 straight weeks and it's fine. Like I don't have any issue with it. When I first played that first week, I could not get over how janky it was, how janky it felt anyways.
Yeah. If it wasn't for Orion, I'm not sure Nate would be on this podcast right now.
Yeah, pretty much this is true. So a lot of new players, you give them Orion, then you got to say, this bug will get you, this bug will get you. I think just getting it less buggy so that you also don't lose a new player to a buggy client.
Yeah, I agree. And I expect if we're able to put together a modern client, and it's quite an effort to do that, especially a cross-platform modern client, which is our ultimate goal, I fully expect us to, the population of the shard to go up. Right. I think that's a major blocker to a lot of people. The population of the shard is already one of the biggest ever. But if we had a, client that ran at 144 FPS, I think that would get more than just the veterans back. That would actually have, new players. So I totally agree with you. That's why I'm working on the project. I had the same feeling, I come back to UO, every free shard or whatever every couple of years, and it's a real struggle to watch this game run at 12.5 FPS. So I think it's a solvable problem, and we're closer than we've ever been before. And I know we have the support of Owen and Lutheus. They would love to see it as well, and they've been very supportive of the work I've been doing there. And I've got a lot more help these days. To the point where certainly in this new Orion rewrite client we've got going, which we can maybe segue into.
Yeah, it's a good segue. So you've got a new project that may not even be in Orion once this new project gets off the ground. Owen's mentioned it, you've mentioned it, but I don't know that our players here really know what's coming.
Yeah, so the main issue with Orion is it's written in a language called C++. The original author did it as a learning project, was intentionally rewriting everything from scratch to learn. And that's a challenge. When you try to take on a code base like that, everything is entangled with everything else. It's written by, I believe he was a college student, wrote it for 4 years in college. It was his first major software project. He did a phenomenal job. We're all very grateful that he worked so diligently at it to get it to where it is. But it's certainly a challenge. And I spent a long time, 6 months, 8 months, looking for people who would have the time to put in to like take this over the finish line. And I couldn't find anybody who knew C++ and had sufficient time to be able to do it. But I did find a lot of C# developers. So, I got talking with some of the people and ended up spending a lot of time talking with the developer of there's a map called Enhanced Map, and it kind of comes bundled with Razor Enhanced, although you can use it separately. And I got talking to him quite a bit, and I said, we really got to do something about this. And he really wanted to write a client. And I was like, well, what if we just start translating Orion to C#? And he just took it and went and just started doing it. And he's been at it for, I don't know, maybe 6 months and translating, Orion, and he's using other open source clients of the past as reference as well, and taking all the best sorts of parts of all of them and translating them into a new modern client. And it's all based on a really popular game design framework. It's the same one that the game Terraria uses. And so it's a lot less code than Orion because a lot of it's already done for us. It's still a gigantic undertaking. I don't want to diminish the amount of effort that has gone into it, but he really has just been working away really diligently, translating it, and he's really far along at this point. And we've slowly been picking up more and more people who are C# developers and want to help. And we've got 4 or 5 more people who are now helping a lot, submitting patches all the time. The Discord channel for that is, really active with, nerdy developer talk every day. So I do a lot of sort of consulting on that and the occasional patch, but I have not done a ton of work there because I'm supporting Orion here and server performance here and Razor here. Certainly that project is intended to replace Orion. And just because there is so many more developers available to help. So I think we're almost there.
Wait, that's what I'm worried about, right? Like Orion was almost there, and the XNLA one was getting there, but none of them ever get the finish line.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one is close to passing Orion already, and so every time you start over like this, it's a little bit easier because you just use the other ones as reference, and you don't have to resolve all the problems. The hardest part is figuring out how things are supposed to work, not coding it to do what you already know it should do. So this has gone much quicker. Obviously, it didn't take us 4 years of work. It's been like 6 months of translation. And in a lot of ways, it's already better than Orion. It runs on Linux and Mac natively. It's actually runs faster. It's much more efficient. So even people with lower end video cards are going to get great FPS on it. There's a couple of gumps that are left, and we need to port over the assistant. I did that for Orion. I could probably do it again for this new client. It's close, and I think with Outlands looming, there is certainly a huge amount of demand. I come back to my computer to 20 pings, 20 messages a day on Discord saying, do you have another release of Orion? When is ClassicUO going to be ready? All these sort of things. The demand is definitely there, and the motivated people are there on this one. So I'm really hopeful. I think we're going to make it.
Yeah, this is good news, I think, for the Shard and probably just UO as a whole, if you get a nice modern client.
Do you want to move on to the Q&A with the audience? We have a couple of questions there.
Yeah, we have a couple that were asked earlier and also asked in some other Discords too. So
yeah, let's start the ones that were asked earlier to give people more time to type.
Okay, Rex asked, I think you were looking this up. I don't know if you actually found it. Do you know the bonus to weapon special rate from backstab stack? Like weapon skill is 10% arms lore, 10% backstab, 25%. So with max weapon and arms lore, a backstab would have 45% chance of weapon special.
Yeah, so I got the code in front of me. It says, so the base chance of a weapon special attack is 10%. The stealth bonus is 25%. The arms load bonus is 10% at GM. Let's see, there's something called prowess. I don't know what that is. There is a water aspect bonus as well. I don't have the numbers there in front of me, but it goes up with your aspect tier. Basically, it takes all those numbers that I just listed, it adds them together to get your total chance. So it does 10% plus 25% plus 10% would be 45% chance.
Nice.
Okay, cool. And then Megahertz, he asked, is there a timeline to get Orion playing nicely with Ultimate Mapper? I think we already addressed that, though. It's
Yeah,
only
as soon as I can.
playing and using Orion, so we already addressed that one. Soon is the answer. And then I got a big one from Zachary Carter, which I don't know that you have the knowledge of for this one either, but you can give a shot at it. What are you doing to prevent another IPY2? What is the Outlands doing that is unique to prevent slow and invasive performance degradation? It seemingly happens with every unofficial UO shard. What is UO Outlands doing to ensure it won't end in the same performance disaster that most every other unofficial UO shard ends in?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of things there that this shard is doing. Luthien really knows what he's doing, first of all. He has got a lot of experience in Run UO and how to make this thing work. And so one thing I think is key to this that slows down performance over time is the number of items in the world. And because you have to iterate over all the items in the world to do saves and things like that. So one thing, and you guys thought it was for your own convenience, but it's actually to help with server performance. But one thing he added was the storage shelves. And the way those are actually coded in the background makes them, however many items you take and you put it in a storage shelf, say you take 10, the code that has to deal with the storage shelf can execute in then 1/10 of the time that the code would take to execute, over all 10 items individually. So the storage shelves are actually a performance thing. That fixes a huge amount of items in the world that slow everything down. Is everybody who plays UO is just giant pixel hoarder storing stuff in your house. That's what slows it down. The other major things we're doing are we're doing real CPU profiling and testing of the code and looking at live data to guide us on what to optimize. I do this for a living, so I'm actually a professional who makes servers run fast. So hopefully we can do it. I don't see any reason why this server couldn't scale to absolutely enormous sizes before it gets bogged down.
Yeah, that's good news. And I don't know that I've actually seen the degradation he's talking about, but maybe when a shard's been around a while, all the different save states.
I think the classic case is like hybrid saves. Hybrid saves take 40 seconds or something.
So one of the live listeners, Donald Trump, asked, I guess he's referring to the ClassicUO. He asked, will it be open source? Will it be easily moddable by server owners? And how's performance? What will it do for targeting and macros?
It's entirely open source already, and it will remain so. It will be easily moddable by server owners if they know C# and know what they're doing. Hopefully, there's some server owners who just take Run UO, make a couple tweaks, and release a server. Then there's some server owners who are like Luthien and really code and are changing everything all the time. People who really code and know what they're doing are not going to have any trouble changing it. The performance is great. It can run on a toaster. In terms of targeting and macros, right now it's just cloning the classic client. Exactly. We don't even have all that implemented yet, but that's what we're doing for the first alpha release. Then we'll add Razor, probably this Razor Community Edition. And then over time, I think, this is still an open debate, but I think we're going to move toward eliminating Razor and just incorporating all the features into the client itself. But the capabilities will be somewhere in the Razor/Steam, level. It's not going to be entirely scriptable and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Having an assist tool is an odd thing. It actually turns some people off of the game. Anytime you can heavily modify with a third-party tool, you get a subset of users that don't like their MMOs to be tinkered with very much.
Yeah.
And you push them away. Whereas if it's in the client itself, they're less bothered by it.
Yeah, I agree entirely. If it was an actual gump in the client, it would be much smoother.
Donald Trump also asked, any ability for server owners to force this specific client?
I will say I'm working on that. So anybody with sufficient knowledge can hack anything. If the program's running on your computer, you own it, and you can do whatever you want to it. But I can make it harder, right? And this is what these gaming companies are doing to prevent cheating all the time, is making it harder all the time. So I understand what some of the strategies are to make it more difficult to use cheat clients and things like that. And so I'm going to work over time to implement those things. Certainly for non-hacker level people, yes, we will make it so the server owners can force this client.
Cool. All right. We've already passed an hour, so we'll just do a brief segment on the news, unless you have any more topics you wanted to touch on, Jaden.
No, it's been fantastic, guys.
All right, cool. So in the news, we've already talked about this, but the lag issues are resolved. Owen was kind of knocking on wood when he said that, but it's been a few days now. It's looking pretty good. Population's growing pretty quickly. In the launch week debrief, Owen actually mentioned there's almost 1,200 unique IPs, so that's pretty huge. That's not counting multiple clients. That's unique IPs. And you can fake some of those, but it gives a pretty good representation of how the server's growing. Corrupted shrines are spawning. It sounds like they're kind of
we're actually at 1,400 players, 1,200 unique, which is interesting in that you can't just take Outlands number and divide it into half or by 3. There's a lot of people that are only playing one client.
Yep.
So that means they're actively playing the game, which I think is can be unique to UO.
Yeah, it's nice not to see everyone triple boxing, even though that's kind of difficult to do. Yeah, the corrupted shrines are spawning. I haven't got a chance to do one, but
there is a video on YouTube that Expo posted. It's kind of a fast forward take on it, but you see the insanity that shit is going to be.
Some pretty cool stuff. Like, I guess people that played before will know, like, sometimes the skill scrolls would go straight to your backpack, and they're doing a similar kind of thing. If you stay near the boss while loot's being handed out, it goes straight to your pack. So that's really good. It gives you a little chance to get away before the PKs rush in, maybe.
Yeah, it gives it to you in an onk that you click, and then that gives you the goods. So you
really?
get so many of those things based on your performance.
Oh, gotcha. All right, what else we got there in the news, Nate?
They cranked on these societies, I think, and tweaked them a little bit. You get double bonus this week due to a bug they had. So if you haven't checked out societies yet, that's in Prevalia, northeast of the bank, right?
Yes.
They fixed provoke, or they tweaked it and then fixed it. Now it does 100% of normal damage. Previously, it was 50%. They put in these clothing alteration kits, which are kind of neat. You have to have GM Taylor to make it. You can change your clothes. I didn't really read it very much. Did you look at it?
I did not. I didn't see much about it. I just kind of skimmed over it. It looks like you can take some kind of cloth now, let's say a special hue cloth, and combine that into regular clothing. And, that way, if you bought some cash shop clothing, you don't have to, rebuy it or anything. You can just mash those two together and get a nice color on that cash shop clothing. It will destroy the cloth, and it'll take about as much cloth to do that kind of thing as it would to make a new item. So if it's expensive cloth, you're going to be spending a lot of money on that.
Yeah, and plus this takes a GM Taylor, which I don't know that we have a huge number of those just yet.
Not yet.
Especially with it taking thousands and thousands and thousands of leather, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Owen and Expo and Clicks put out another launch week debrief, or I guess the first launch week debrief, and that was kind of interesting. It was 1 hour. You get to watch Expo run around the map while they talk about how launch went, which is great. It's going great. We've all been able to play, have fun. I know I've been in a game as much as I can.
I kind of felt relieved when I seen Expo die in the newbie dungeon. I knew it wasn't just me. If you get trapped in traffic in those doorways, it can be pretty brutal sometimes.
Yeah, they need something like you can just freely pass the characters in that first 10 feet of the newbie dungeon. I don't know.
Yeah.
Automatic refresh potion or something when you walk through the door.
Yeah, refresh potions would be nice even. Start new players off with a few of those.
Yeah, and then I think faction warfare is starting up soon. They were kind of holding off, let the launch stuff get underway. I think they're getting turned on this weekend, I think.
Yeah, I gotta say I'm looking forward to this. I'm gonna suck at it, but I don't know exactly what the differences was between regular PvP, but I know the penalties are better. Like maybe you don't lose certain equipment or something. Do you know, Nero?
Not exactly, but I do know there is something in there that makes it less harsh than just open world PvP.
Right.
This is why I built my first character as just a pure warrior, and not with bard stuff, because I want to go right into faction warfare.
Yep, Dexter is probably the way to get into that. You don't want to be blowing regs while you're learning how to PvP.
Yep, and not only that, learning how to use magic at all. So yeah. I'll tackle that first in PvE before I do it like a tank mage or something.
Yep, those auto heal macros are pretty big in PvP, so get that going.
Yeah, I think that's it for this week. Jaden, man, thanks a lot for coming on. And this week's probably heavier on the coding talk, but you are the hero of the server. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much for having me on. Hope you enjoyed playing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Glad to have you, man. Check you later. Thanks for joining us. We plan on doing this again next week. Not quite got down a guest yet, but I'm working on it, and I'll announce that soon in the Fireside Babble or announcements channel.
Go to our website, insideoutlands.com. We have a link to our Discord there. If you join that, you every week we broadcast live at 9:00 at night. We also have another podcast, the Sandbox Podcast, where we cover multi-gaming. Right now, it'll be UO talk, since obviously I'm playing UO for the next foreseeable future, but they'll cover Red Dead 2 and stuff like that, plus plenty of UO talk. See you guys next week.
Later, NetRow.
Peace.